Chapter 1. I found out my husband was cheating on me in first class on a flight to Paris, sitting 2 rows ahead with another woman holding her like I no longer existed, and the man who took the seat beside me was his boss, the same boss who would later fire him for using company money to fund their affair. But in that moment, as I watched my family life quietly collapse somewhere over the Atlantic, I realized this story was no longer about betrayal. It was about what happens when silence ends and systems take over. I watched my husband walk past me without looking up. Not a glance, not a flicker of recognition, just the familiar stride I had known for nearly 15 years, moving forward as if I did not exist. He had his hand resting lightly at the small of another woman's back. It was not dramatic or possessive. It was worse than that. Casual, practiced. The kind of touch you give when you assume no one is watching and when you no longer think you have anything to hide. I was seated 2 rows behind him in the first-class cabin of a flight leaving JFK for Paris. I had boarded early, settled into my seat, ordered a glass of sparkling water, and opened the novel I had brought for the flight. Everything about my morning had been ordinary until that moment. Until Daniel stepped into the aisle with her. She was tall, maybe early 40s, with chestnut hair styled too carefully to be accidental. She wore a cream cashmere wrap draped over her shoulders and carried herself with the relaxed confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. She did not look around. She did not hesitate. She moved like a woman who had already memorized the layout of this cabin. Daniel leaned in slightly as they reached their seats. Row 2, window and aisle. He murmured something to her, and she smiled without turning her head. I could not hear the words, but I recognized the rhythm. I had once been on the receiving end of that voice, low, familiar, reassuring. That was when it hit me. Not the betrayal, not even the shock. It was the certainty that he had already stopped seeing me. I sat very still, my fingers wrapped around the stem of the glass, watching as he helped her stow her bag. He did not rush. He did not look over his shoulder. He did not scan the cabin for anyone he knew. He had no reason to. In his mind, I was not on this plane. The pain came later. What I felt first was something colder and more precise, a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it had been going on long enough for him to forget the habit of looking for me. The woman settled into her seat, crossing her legs toward him. He brushed his knuckles against her arm as he sat down, a small gesture that carried an intimacy earned over time. Not a mistake, not a lapse in judgment. This was not new. I took a slow breath and looked away before my face could betray me. Someone sat down beside me a moment later. I noticed the scent of cologne before I registered the man himself. Clean, understated, familiar. I turned my head slightly and felt the second shift of the morning settle into place. Robert Hale, Senior Vice President of Sales, Daniel's boss. He nodded politely as if seeing me here was mildly unexpected, but not strange enough to comment on right away. He loosened his jacket, adjusted his seat, and glanced toward the window. "Claire," he said quietly, "I did not know you were flying today." Neither did my husband, I thought. I smiled and returned the greeting, keeping my voice even. Last-minute change of plans. Work does that sometimes. He gave a brief chuckle of agreement and looked down the aisle, his gaze drifting forward. His eyes landed on row 2. On Daniel. On the woman beside him. Robert frowned slightly. "That looks like Daniel up there." "It does," I said. He tilted his head, studying the scene more carefully. Daniel leaned towards the woman again, his posture open and relaxed. The woman laughed softly, touching his forearm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Robert's expression shifted. Confusion first. Then something tighter. "Is that someone from the conference?" he asked. I did not answer immediately. I took another breath, steady and controlled. No explanations. Not yet. I believe he told you he was traveling alone, I said. Robert's jaw set. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Whatever conclusions were forming behind his eyes were not mine to manage. The flight attendant approached, offering pre-departure drinks. Robert ordered a whiskey. I declined. My hands were steady, but I did not trust my voice yet. As the cabin door closed, I felt an odd sense of separation, like the world I had known an hour ago was already out of reach, sealed behind me along with the jet bridge. Daniel never looked back. During takeoff, I stared out the window at the shrinking skyline, letting the familiar landmarks fade into abstraction. The city where we had built our life together disappeared beneath a layer of cloud, and with it the illusion that I was still part of his present. I did not cry. I did not rehearse confrontations in my head. I did not imagine dramatic scenes or raised voices. What surfaced instead was memory. Quiet, insistent memory. The way my mother used to say that the worst betrayals were the ones that happened in plain sight. The ones you sensed before you could prove them. The ones that required a kind of willful blindness to ignore. I had sensed this. Not today. Not even last week. Months ago, maybe longer. The distance. The subtle rearranging of priorities. The way Daniel had stopped asking certain questions. The way he no longer seemed to need my presence to steady himself. I had told myself it was work. The pressure of competition. The stress of being on the edge of a promotion he had wanted for years. I had told myself that marriages went through seasons, and that this was one of endurance. What I had not allowed myself to consider was replacement. Robert shifted beside me, his glass untouched. He leaned slightly toward the aisle, his attention still fixed on row 2. He did not say anything more about it, neither did I. Silence in that moment felt like the most responsible choice. The plane leveled off and the cabin settled into the muted rhythm of a long-haul flight. Screens flickered on, trays were lowered, conversation resumed in low murmurs around us. Up ahead, Daniel and the woman leaned toward each other, heads closed, their world small and self-contained. He laughed at something she said, the sound unmistakable even from this distance. I recognized it. The easy laugh he rarely used at home anymore. I felt the sharp edge of anger then, but it did not take over. It sharpened my focus instead. This was not the time for questions. This was not the time for explanations or ultimatums. Whatever story Daniel had been telling himself, whatever version of reality he believed he was living, it was already unstable. And now it had witnesses. I glanced at Robert again, catching the tension in his posture. He was not a man who tolerated surprises, especially the kind that carried professional implications. Whatever he was thinking, it extended beyond the personal. Good, I thought. I turned my attention back to the window, watching the pale blue of the sky deepen as we pushed eastward. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the life I thought I had would finally be forced into the open. I did not know how yet. I did not know when. But I knew this much. The consequences would come from the place Daniel believed was safest. Chapter 2. People thought my life was easy. They saw the house in Brookline with the white porch railing and the hydrangeas I never remembered to prune on time. They saw Daniel and me at school events, standing side by side, smiling in the practiced way of parents who knew when to look unified. They saw 2 children who were polite, well-fed, and never late. They saw stability and assumed happiness followed naturally. I let them believe that. On weekday mornings, I packed lunches while Daniel scrolled through emails at the kitchen island. He always stood, never sat, as if staying in motion would make the day feel shorter. He used to tell me what he was reading, who he was meeting, what the pressure points were at work. Somewhere along the way, that stopped, not abruptly, not in a way that invited confrontation. It faded the way light does when the sun shifts behind clouds, gradual enough that you tell yourself it is temporary. That morning before the flight, Sophie came down the stairs with her backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds already in. She was 13 and had mastered the art of appearing independent while still hovering close enough to absorb tension. She paused at the doorway, watching Daniel. "Are you coming to my recital next week?" she asked. Daniel nodded without looking up. "Of course." She waited a beat, then another. He did not elaborate, did not ask what time, did not ask if she was nervous. Sophie glanced at me just briefly, and I gave her a small smile. She shrugged and left. Caleb followed behind her, dragging his shoes, asking if we could have pancakes for dinner. Daniel laughed and told him maybe this weekend. He ruffled Caleb's hair, a familiar gesture that still looked convincing. I remember thinking how easy it was for him to switch it on. The cracks in our marriage never came from explosions. They came from absences, from the conversations that ended too quickly, from the way Daniel stopped telling me about his day unless I asked, and even then the answers felt pre-packaged. "How was work?" I would say. "Busy," he would reply. Same as always. I did not press. I told myself I was being supportive. I told myself this was what partnership looked like when one person was under pressure. I had built my career by learning when to push and when to step back. I applied the same logic to my marriage. That logic kept the house quiet. At night, after the kids were asleep, Daniel sat with his laptop on the couch, angled just enough away from me to make reading the screen impossible without leaning in. I noticed the change and then pretended I had not. He stopped asking me about my own work, stopped noticing when I came home late. Once I mentioned that I might have to travel to San Francisco for a client meeting. He nodded and said okay without asking when or for how long. That should have landed harder than it did. Instead, I folded the information away with everything else. My mother used to say that women stay because staying feels safer than detonating their own lives. I had rolled my eyes when she said it. I was not afraid. I was practical. That was the lie I told myself. The truth was quieter. I was afraid of what would happen to Sophie if the ground shifted beneath her, just as she was finding her footing. I was afraid of what Caleb would lose if his world fractured before he understood how to hold it together. I was afraid of becoming the woman everyone whispered about at school pickup. So I stayed. I smoothed over awkward moments. I filled in the blanks Daniel left behind. At dinner one night, Sophie asked if Dad was still going to Boston for work so much. Daniel paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "I'm traveling a bit," he said. "It's temporary." She frowned. "You said that last month." I cleared my throat and redirected the conversation, asking about her math test. Daniel shot me a look that might have been gratitude or irritation. I could not tell any more. That was when I realized he had stopped confiding in me. Not about big things, about small things. He no longer complained about his boss or vented about a missed opportunity. He no longer talked through decisions out loud. He was making plans somewhere else. I felt it most sharply when I stopped being the first person he called with news. When he landed a new account, I found out days later casually over breakfast. When a conference date changed, it appeared on the shared calendar without explanation. Once I asked why he had not mentioned it. "I thought I did," he said, already reaching for his keys. I let it go. The house ran smoothly because I made it run smoothly. School forms were signed, dentist appointments scheduled, groceries stocked. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. That was the danger. There were no scenes, no slammed doors, no evidence I could point to and say, "This is the moment it broke." There was just a growing sense that I was maintaining something that no longer included me at its center. I knew even then that if it fell apart, the consequences would not be contained. There were mortgages and tuition plans and custody schedules that lived just beneath the surface of our daily routines. I had not looked too closely at them. Looking would have meant admitting I might need them. So I stayed busy. I stayed quiet. I stayed reasonable. Daniel mistook that for ignorance. On the morning I left for the airport, he kissed my cheek and told me to text when I landed. He did not ask where I was sitting. He did not ask if I wanted a ride. Sophie hugged me longer than usual. Caleb asked if Paris was near Disney World. I smiled and told them both I would be back soon. As the car pulled away from the house, I watched the front door close behind them, the familiar shape of my life receding into something fragile and conditional. I did not know yet how much of it would survive, but I knew I had been holding it together with silence, and silence was no longer strong enough. Chapter 3. I did not confront him that night. Silence had carried me this far, and I needed it to carry me a little longer. The house felt strangely calm after Daniel left for his supposed conference dinner. The kids were at a sleepover, the dishwasher hummed softly, and every surface looked exactly as it always did. That normalcy was what unsettled me most. It made the truth feel unreal, like something I had imagined and could still choose to forget. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table staring at the closed laptop Daniel had left behind. He usually took it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. Tonight, he had forgotten it. Forgotten was too generous a word. He had grown careless. I told myself I would only look long enough to quiet the noise in my head, just enough to confirm that I was overreacting, that there was an explanation I had missed. The screen lit up with a soft chime when I opened it. No password prompt. My hands went cold. His email was already open. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Work threads, calendar reminders, a note from facilities about parking. I scrolled, my heart beating faster with each line that failed to reassure me. Then I noticed the icon in the corner. A second account. I clicked it without thinking. The inbox loaded slowly, each second stretching. When it finally appeared, the first message was a booking confirmation. Not for Boston, not for Chicago. Paris. 2 tickets. First class. My name was not on either one. I read it again, then a third time. The letters stayed where they were. The next message was a hotel reservation. A suite. 7 nights. The same neighborhood where Daniel and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary. I closed my eyes, breathing through the tightness in my chest. This was not an impulse. This was a plan. I scrolled further. Dinner reservations, a river cruise, a museum tour, everything scheduled with the care of someone who expected the future to unfold exactly as written. There were emails between Daniel and her, dozens of them. They stretched back months. I did not read them all at once. I could not. I read enough to understand the shape of the lie. He told her we were separated. He told her the divorce was inevitable. He told her the kids were adjusting. None of it was true. I closed the laptop gently and pressed my palms flat against the table. The shock came in waves, but it did not knock me down. It sharpened something in me instead. I thought of Sophie waiting for answers I had redirected, of Caleb asking about pancakes and believing maybe was a promise. I thought of the life I had been holding together with silence. I opened the laptop again. This time I took pictures of everything, each confirmation, each message thread. I sent them to an account Daniel did not know existed. When I was done, I closed the browser, returned the laptop to its place, and washed my hands as if I could rinse the feeling from my skin. The next morning, I called an attorney before I called anyone else. Her name was Allison Green. She came recommended by a colleague who had once described her as unflappable. That was what I needed. Her office was in downtown Boston, glass walls and neutral tones. She listened without interrupting as I laid out what I knew and what I suspected. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, hands folded. "You did the right thing by coming here first," she said, "before confronting him." "I did not want to make a mistake," I said. "You did not," she replied. "This is not about catching him in the act. It is about protecting yourself and your children." She explained the process calmly. Asset separation, documentation, custody considerations. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. Then I mentioned the credit card. Her expression changed, just a fraction. "You are certain it was a company account?" she asked. "I am," I said. "The confirmation lists the billing source." She nodded slowly. "That changes the scope." "How?" "It means this is no longer just personal misconduct," she said. "It is financial, and companies take that seriously." The word settled between us. Financial. I left her office with a list of steps and a sense of direction I had not felt in months. There would be no confrontation yet, no scenes. There would be preparation. On my way home, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He called again later, sounding distracted. "Hey, just landed," he said. "Everything okay at home?" "Fine," I replied when I called back. My voice sounded steady, almost convincing. "Good," he said. "Long day? Talk later." "Sure," I said. After we hung up, I sat in the car for a moment longer than necessary. The truth was no longer loud in my head. It was organized. Over the next few days, I followed Allison's instructions carefully. I gathered bank statements, retirement account summaries, mortgage documents. I made copies and stored them securely. I told myself I was being cautious, not paranoid. I also called Robert Hale. I did not accuse. I did not explain. I simply asked if he had a moment to talk. "There may be something you should be aware of," I said. He did not press for details. He did not need to. His silence told me he had already begun connecting dots. That night, Daniel came home later than usual. He kissed my cheek and asked what was for dinner. "Leftovers," I said. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. I watched him move through the kitchen, familiar and foreign all at once. The man I had built a life with. The man who believed he was safe. I felt the ache, then sharp and real, but it did not pull me under. It pushed me forward. This was no longer about what he had done to me. It was about what he had put in motion. And once systems were involved, outcomes stopped being personal. Chapter 4. Paris looked exactly the way it always had in postcards. Pale stone buildings, narrow streets, light that softened everything it touched. I noticed these things only in passing, as if they belonged to a different trip, a different version of me. I arrived the morning after Daniel and Lauren. I knew that because Robert Hale mentioned it casually as we walked through the terminal together. "They landed yesterday afternoon," he said. "Seemed eager." "Eager for the meetings?" I replied. He glanced at me, searching my face, then nodded once. He had already stopped pretending this was only about meetings. We stayed at different hotels. That was intentional. I wanted space. I wanted control. I wanted to arrive where I was going without the weight of unfinished conversations pressing against my ribs. The conference sessions filled the first day. Panels, presentations, polite applause. Daniel did not see me. Or maybe he did and chose not to react. Either way, he kept his attention forward. His posture confident, his smile intact. Lauren sat beside him, listening attentively, her notebook open, her hand resting on his knee beneath the table. It was subtle enough to miss if you were not looking for it. I was. Robert watched too. I could feel the shift in him, the calculation, the narrowing of options. That evening there was a dinner reservation Daniel had made weeks earlier. A restaurant overlooking the river, candlelight, linen tablecloths, the kind of place you choose when you want an evening to feel important. It was also the place he had proposed to me. I arrived a few minutes late on purpose. They were already seated. Daniel was facing the entrance, Lauren beside him. He looked up as I approached, his expression flickering through confusion, recognition, and something close to panic in the span of a second. "Claire," he said, standing abruptly. I smiled politely. "Daniel." Lauren looked between us, her smile faltering. "You know each other?" "Yes," I said. "We do." Robert joined me, pulling out a chair with deliberate calm. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, though it was not a question. Daniel froze. His hand tightened around the back of his chair. "Bob," he said, "I did not realize you were joining us." "I did not realize you were traveling with company," Robert replied evenly. The waiter hovered, sensing tension, but unsure how to respond. I nodded to him, ordering a glass of water. Robert ordered wine. Daniel did not order anything. Lauren's voice was careful. "Daniel told me you were separated." I met her eyes. "We are not." The silence that followed was heavy but controlled. No raised voices, no accusations, just facts laid gently on the table, impossible to ignore. Daniel cleared his throat. "This is not the place for this." "It is exactly the place," I said. "You chose it." Robert leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, we need to talk." Daniel laughed, a brittle sound. "About what?" "About your expenses," Robert said. "And your judgment." Daniel's color drained. "This is personal." "It stopped being personal when company funds were involved," Robert replied. Lauren looked at Daniel, then truly looked at him, as if seeing his face clearly for the first time. "What does he mean?" Daniel reached for her hand. She pulled it back. "I paid for this trip," he said. "I can explain." Robert shook his head. "You charged it to your corporate account. Flights, hotel, meals, everything." Lauren's breath caught. "You said your company covered travel." "They cover business travel," Robert said. "Not this." The waiter returned with the wine and placed it carefully in front of Robert, then retreated without a word. The room continued around us, other diners laughing softly, unaware that a different kind of unraveling was taking place at our table. Lauren stood, her chair scraped softly against the floor. "You told me your divorce was nearly final." Daniel looked at me, desperation edging into his voice. "Claire, please." I did not raise my voice. I did not interrupt. I let him speak himself into smaller and smaller corners. "I never said that," he told Lauren. "I said things were complicated." "You said your wife had moved on," she replied. Her hands were shaking now. "You said you were free." She looked at me again. "I am so sorry." I nodded. "I believe you." That was when Daniel lost control. "You planned this," he said, his voice sharp now. "You embarrassed me." Robert's expression hardened. "No one embarrassed you but yourself." He stood adjusting his jacket. "We will continue this conversation with legal and finance present tomorrow." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. The authority in Robert's tone left no room for negotiation. Lauren gathered her things slowly. "I need air," she said. "I need time." She did not look at Daniel again. When she was gone, Daniel sank back into his chair. The confidence he had worn so carefully slipped away, leaving something exposed and small. "You did not have to do this here," he said quietly. "I did not do anything," I replied. "I stopped covering for you." Robert placed a business card on the table. "You are suspended effective immediately," he said. "Your access will be reviewed pending investigation." Daniel stared at the card as if it were written in another language. The bill arrived. Robert paid it without comment. I stood smoothing my jacket, feeling oddly light. Outside, the night air was cool. The river moved steadily beside us, indifferent to what had just happened. Robert spoke first. "I am sorry you were put in this position." "So am I," said, "but it was inevitable." He nodded. "It usually is." I walked back to my hotel alone. Each step felt measured, intentional. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clear. Behind me, Daniel's world was collapsing in the one place he had believed would protect him: his career, his image, his carefully curated sense of control. I did not need to watch it fall. By the time I reached my room, the city lights stretched out before me, quiet and expansive. For the first time in months, I slept without replaying conversations in my head. The rest would come later. Chapter 5. The next morning, nothing felt dramatic. Paris continued as if my life had not just split cleanly in two. People carried baguettes under their arms. Scooters buzzed past cafes. The sky held that soft gray light that made everything look like a photograph. Inside my hotel room, my phone kept lighting up, and each vibration felt like a door closing somewhere far away. Daniel called 8 times before noon. I did not answer. Robert sent one text that was almost clinical. Investigation initiated. Your documentation will be requested through counsel. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Allison Green. She replied within minutes. Do not speak to him. Do not respond in writing. Keep everything. I followed her instructions the way I followed a recipe when I needed to feel steady. Step by step. No improvising. Daniel left a voicemail that afternoon. His voice sounded raw, like he had been awake all night. Claire, please. Just talk to me. We can fix this. I made a mistake. A mistake is spilling coffee on a white shirt. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary dinner reservation. This was a plan, funded, scheduled, protected by lies. I deleted the voicemail without listening again. When I flew home, I did it alone. Not in a poetic way, just in the simple, factual way that my seat was empty beside me, and my mind was finally quiet. Sophie was waiting in the doorway when I walked in. She tried to look casual and failed. She hugged me with an intensity that startled me, then pulled back as if embarrassed. Are you okay? She asked. I cupped her cheek gently. I will be. Caleb ran into the hallway and grabbed my legs like he always did after a trip. His voice was bright and certain. Did you bring me something from Paris? I laughed softly. I did. A little Eiffel Tower keychain. He was satisfied with that. Children accept small symbols more easily than adults. That night after they were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with Allison on speakerphone. Here is what happens next, she said. We file. We disclose. We request temporary orders. Custody support use of the marital home. It is not about punishment. It is about stability. I stared at the wood grain of the table, listening to the language of a life being reorganized. Will he fight me? I asked. It depends on his ego and his counsel, she replied. But based on what you showed me, he will not have much leverage. 2 days later, a representative from Daniel's company called Allison. The investigation had moved quickly from suspicion to procedure. They did not call me directly. They did not ask for my opinion. That was the point. Systems do not run on emotion. Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending review, his corporate card, and access revoked while finance audited his charges. The final decision did not come with fireworks. It came with an email from his Human Resources Department confirming termination for misuse of company funds and violation of travel and expense policy. Daniel came to the house the following weekend. He stood on the porch, hands shoved into his coat pockets, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He had not shaved. His eyes were rimmed red, not with tears, but with exhaustion. When I opened the door, he swallowed hard. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We can talk here, I said. His shoulders dropped. I was going to tell you. No, I said. You were going to keep going until you could leave without consequences. His mouth tightened. That is not fair. It is accurate. He tried again, softer. I love the kids. I love you. I do. I felt the ache of old loyalty tug at me, the version of me that still wanted my marriage to be real. But it was not strong enough anymore. If you loved me, I said quietly, you would not have made me invisible. He flinched as if I had slapped him. I am sorry, he whispered. I nodded once. Be sorry in a way that shows up for them, not in a way that asks me to rescue you. Inside, Sophie was awake. She stood at the top of the stairs watching. Daniel saw her and his face crumpled. Soph, he called. She did not move. Are you and Dad getting divorced? she asked me, her voice steady in the way teenagers steady themselves. I did not lie. Yes. Her eyes filled, but she blinked hard. Is it because of someone else? I took a breath, choosing each word carefully. Your father made choices that hurt our family. My job is to keep you safe and steady. That is what I am going to do. She nodded slowly. It was not acceptance, it was comprehension. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. They were logistical, school schedules, attorney emails, parenting plans, accounts separated and documented. Daniel moved into a short-term rental across town. He started showing up for supervised transitions at first, not because he was dangerous, but because Sophie asked for space, and Allison recommended structure while emotions were raw. Daniel did not lose everything overnight. That is not how consequences work in real life. He lost something each day. First his position, then his routine, then the easy confidence that used to walk into rooms ahead of him. He called less. He stopped leaving long messages. When I saw him at Sophie's recital, he stood near the back of the auditorium, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the stage, as if sheer attention could undo what he had done. After the recital, he approached cautiously. You did great, he told Sophie. She nodded without meeting his eyes. Thanks. He looked at me. Can we talk sometime? Just us. I kept my voice even. There is nothing left to negotiate between us. The lawyers handle the logistics. You handle being a father. His throat bobbed. I miss my family. So do I said, but missing it does not rebuild it. I started therapy a month after he moved out. Dr. Marin Lewis had a quiet office, soft lighting, no framed inspirational quotes. She listened the way someone listens when they have heard every version of pain and still believe people can survive it. It feels like failure, I admitted in our second session. It feels like change, she corrected gently. You did not fail. You recognized the truth and stopped betraying yourself. That sentence stayed with me. Over time, the anger did not vanish. It simply lost its grip. It stopped being the thing that woke me up at 3 a.m. In its place came something steadier, a sense of dignity that did not require an audience. One Saturday morning, Caleb asked if Dad would ever live with us again. I was buttering toast, my hands moving automatically. No, I said, but Dad will still be your dad, and you will still be loved. He considered that, then asked if we could go to the park. Life kept insisting on being lived. A year later, I ran into Lauren by accident outside a coffee shop near the courthouse. She looked different. Not worse, just quieter, like someone who had learned a lesson the hard way. She hesitated, then stepped closer. I did not know, she said. I swear I did not know. I believe you, I replied. Her eyes glistened. I am sorry. So am I said. And I meant it in the way you mean sorrow for wasted time, not in the way you mean regret. When I walked back to my car, I realized something that surprised me. I was not thinking about Daniel, not in that consuming way that used to steal my breath. I was thinking about Sophie's college list, Caleb's soccer schedule, the groceries I needed to pick up, the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt on truth. If you are listening to this and you feel that tightness in your chest when something does not add up, if you have been telling yourself you are overreacting, I want to ask you something. What is your silence protecting, and what is it costing you? And if your gut has been trying to get your attention, how long are you going to make it wait?